Mr. Chairman, friends, we are such a vast and complex country that almost anything you say about India is both true and untrue at the same time. I heard with great admiration what Ravi Prasad was saying earlier in the earlier session, and I followed both Vijay Panda and Ravi now. And I largely agree with them on many issues. I rejoice, for instance, the 2G spectrum auctions that he so ably conducted. Because I am the man who went to the Supreme Court arguing that the license should be cancelled, though that were granted for immorality. And for the first time in India, 122 licenses were cancelled. And as a result of that judgment, there's also this auctioning of the coal. And again, his government, the Indian government, did a remarkable job, cleaned up very quickly, very efficiently, and I take great pride in that. There are many good things happening. As a country, we have performed creditably, with moderate success over the past 66 years, but with some significant and glaring omissions and failings. Relative to the rest of the world, democratic world, where they were after 60 or 70 years of freedom or democracy, I think they've actually done a much better job. But the pity is that we're not in that age. Because our rise as a democracy, our maturation as a democracy, is coinciding with dramatic technological and economic changes globally. And therefore the luxury that the United States had, Britain had, much of Europe had, other democratic countries had, we simply do not have. And therefore the comments I now make are in that context. Because I'm a great optimist like Jay and Ravi Prasad. In the past 20 years, in this very university or MIT or elsewhere in this country or in India, many people have seen me as a great cheerleader for Indian democracy and envisioning a great future for the country. And therefore, because of the brevity that's necessary on account of time, I'll have to be a little sharp. Please put it in perspective. We enjoy enormous goodwill today in the world. Probably very few rising powers enjoy so much of goodwill and willing consent and support of the rest of the world, thanks to China. Because we are seen as a democratic, a very diverse, a very inclusive, a very liberal, and very non-threatening power. And I don't have to show the contrast. And therefore people want this country to succeed. Sometimes it appears as if the rest of the world wants India to succeed more than Indians themselves. And therefore, Ashutosh, the point he made in the earlier session about comparing with China, is incredibly important. You cannot ignore it. We cannot continue to languish in 19th century politics and governance and aspire for 21st century economics and global power status. There is a fundamental contrast, and that's the point I've been making for years, and in recent months, if anything, my ideas are sharpened in this respect. We have become an unwieldy republic. Many of our strengths also have become our liabilities. There is an increasing gulf between the desire and aspiration at one level, the policy and the governmental needs at another level, and the outcomes at the ultimate level. And no nation which aspires to be great quickly can afford this increasing gap between aspiration, policy, and outcome. I think the evidence is compelling. In this gathering, I don't have to mention. But just to sort of complete the discussion telegraphically, education. Out of the 73 countries surveyed in PISA, 2074 countries and entities surveyed in 2009, in school education at the age of 15, India ranked 73rd out of 74 nations. We can easily be in the top 10, 15 civilizationally in terms of society's great aspiration, the kids' hard work, and so on and so forth. But we are 73. And the response of the government is spectacular. When I went to town about it, they said, henceforth, India shall not participate in these surveys. Post-2009, we did not participate. We think we're doing that. No problem, no compassion, no worry.
It was not my decision.
So not yours. Your predecessor government, but your government continues that. we have other surveys, etc., which so I don't want to go into details. Many of you are familiar. Healthcare. I'm a medical doctor. True, many people forget that. I am absolutely disgusted, pained, and deeply distraught. We are among the worst in the world in terms of healthcare outcomes or healthcare expenditure of the government as a share of public expenditure. I don't want to go into details. I actually prepared a list of countries which are worse than India. It is so shameful, I don't want to mention that. Electricity, Ashutosh mentioned that. Our consumption is 565 units, may have been a little better today, maybe 500 units. China's is 3,925, United States is 13,100. I don't say we should reach American level, but in the 21st century world, you cannot consume so little of power, energy, and become a significant economic or technological modern power. No way. Ease of doing business, we rank 142nd. Below every BRIC country, minus India, all BRICS countries, Kenya, Tanzania, all of Southeast Asia, Iran, Ethiopia, to just mention a few of the countries. Not good enough. Agriculture, take one example, the Gulf Britain policy and outcomes. Retail chains, we had so much debate about agriculture, value addition, compressing the market chain and retail chains, and I'm one of the great supporters of that. I must declare my bias in favor of market where our market works. So far, what happened? Almost zero. What happened to the plight of the farmers and to the value addition in terms of getting the end price to the producer? We are still where we were 10, 15 years ago. I can go on and on. But basically, there are four great challenges. Let me sum up. Challenge one. For 25, 30 years, when from the great state of Orissa, Mr. Biju Patnaik, Mr. N.T. Ramarao, then Karunanidhi and others, the minister talked about it. I think Jayapanda talked about that. These people waged a great battle for federalism, for Abdullah and others. And we succeeded in that. And many of us, including me, we were all somewhat rejoicing in that and we were complacent. In the past 20 years, we see creeping centralization by consent, by consensus, by unanimity, which is even more destructive because there's no protest. The 73rd, 74th Amendments, they're a disaster, contrary to popular perception. Of course, that there should be strong local governments, viable, democratic, empowered is non-negotiable. But this is not the way to do. We created overstructured, underpowered local governments. We haven't given even a chance to improve them in any state if you want. If Orissa wants to do differently, you cannot because the Constitution told you what to do in your village and in your mandal, second or third tier panchayat. Take the Right to Education Act. In the past 10 years, he's already looking at the watch. We spent 5 trillion rupees in excess of what we were ordinarily spending. This is additional expenditure. And we had Right to Education Act. Net outcome, the government school enrollment fell by 10%. Private school enrollment went up by 40%. When this act is specifically aimed at preventing private education, and believe me, that's actually the intent of the act and the provisions of the act. And of course, outcomes I already mentioned to you. Take Food Security Act. It's a disastrous law. Feeding the poor is a desperately necessary thing, but exactly not the way it's conceived in this law. Take the Land Acquisition Act. Again, well-meaning, but disaster. We all know what's happening in the country. Take Employment Guarantee Act. It has some good features, but that's not the way you go about it. You have creeping centralization without protest. And therefore, it's becoming increasingly difficult to change things. There's no flexibility in actually operating on these principles and making better outcomes possible. The second great challenge, incapacity to implement. Almost everything we discuss here, Government of India says, my policy document says it, the Planning Commission says it, some essay somewhere is already there, it's all there. Like a beautiful essay of an undergraduate student, desperately trying to cover every single conceivable point so that he is not found wanting by the professor. But the reality is, what we conceive, even convey as a policy, convert to a policy, and give resources, we fail. 26th January this year, a girl called Rekha, 17 years, intermediate, Nalgonda district of Andhra Pradesh. She committed suicide only because she had no hope of getting a toilet at her home. I never ever endorse suicide, none of us do. But the tragedy of this, in the face of Swachh Bharat campaign, that we could not give confidence that yes, you don't have it today, but in 6 months' time you will surely get it, don't worry. We could not engender the confidence because what we conceive, what happens here, is a radical difference of white chasm. The third is our democracy, which we all celebrate, is reduced to voting and shouting and cynicism. There is no participation. I was watching on my very long plane trip, the longest in my life, thanks to this other Suffragette, that film. And I was reflecting on the American Women Voters League from Philadelphia, which did a remarkable job in improving democracy. You cannot have a democracy where only voting and shouting are the basic principles of citizens' activity. The fourth is massive urbanization. In the next generation, 400 million people are going to migrate to urban India. The largest ever after China accomplished that in the past 25-30 years. All these young men and women whom we call a demographic dividend with raging hormones, with few skills, very little opportunity, no rule of law, it will be a menace and a disaster if we don't handle things quickly. Therefore, my last point, what are the 3 things we need to do? And I urge you all to look at that very seriously, and the government and the political parties. 1, Delhi cannot do it alone. You cannot simply put it on Narendra Modi or somebody else and say you are a messiah, you are a hero, and you deliver. It will not happen. Nowhere else will it happen. You have to make the states truly empowered. The creeping centralization must go. Delhi must limit itself to the central subjects under the southern schedule. The manner of governance, the system of elections, and the manner of designing the bureaucracy and operationalizing and implementing policy, let it go to states entirely. That's what the US does. That's what Germany does. That's what Australia does. That's what even the UK, which is a self-confessed unitary country, does. None of the countries broke up. That actually strengthens unity. We can debate that later. Second, local governments. We have to transfer power and resources. Take the 14th Finance Commission, I rejoiced in that report. But out of the total money sent to the states, only 7% of the money sent to states is going to local governments. If you have any degree of federalism in this country, in our country, you should have at least transferred 20-30% of the money to the local governments, but with accountability. Local governments are weak, disempowered. Citizens, instead of participating, I'm concluding last minute, citizens are participating and unleashing their energies and becoming leaders, have become professional protesters and mendicants. You cannot have a nation of mendicants and protesters. There's so much energy out there. It's not utilized because you centralize power. There's only PM, there's a CM, at the most there's a DM, the unelected fellow. After that, there's nobody else. You cannot run a country like that. And the third one, bureaucracy, to which I belonged. I respect the Indian bureaucracy. It did some good things. It did some terrible things also. You take some of the finest Indians in the civil services, you make monkeys out of them in 10 to 15 years. You have to specialize. You have to remove the monopoly, this Brahmanical notion that they and they alone should occupy all high offices. The best in India, at any time, wherever you come from, must be able to go into government and make a contribution, come out again after 5 years. You have to have choice, and you have to have an executive agency system of accountability, like ISRO does. ISRO does very well. There are, of course, deficiencies. We still are not good at GSLV and all that. But given the resources, it's a remarkable organization. Why? Because they created an institutional framework that works. We have a lot to do. We have very little time to do. Either you choose the path of evolution for the next century or more, becoming an also-ran country, or you really fundamentally change it, instead of creating an alibis for a failure in perpetuity, either democracy or institutions. Instead of utilizing the energies and the freedom of democracy and make every Indian a contributor to the national greatness. The choice is ours. Thank you.
So 3 of the finest minds from Indian politics were here.